Okay, so I'm working on my Lady Karl Franz mod, and since I've already gone over the process of making, Lady Sigvald, I figured I'd just show the asset editor process. I think that people who kind of are inexperienced with this can benefit from just seeing more examples. So first, we're gonna go ahead and file and load up my file that I like to save everything in, and we're gonna look for Karl Franz. Now, in my original one, here's Karl Franz right here, double click. In my original model, I had not used AssetEditor prior to the creation of that mod. That was actually one of my first mods. And so basically I had to just get by with variant mesh definition, much like Sigvald, the Lady Sigvald one. And so I was limited in just taking Rapance's head and putting it on his body. I had to turn his head's alpha off and stuff, just mess with things. But with AssetEditor, it makes it a lot easier. So I'm a little on the fence on whether I want to have her have a bare head again, like before, or if I want her to have the helmet, because I mean, his helmet, it's like a big part of who he is. And so I kind of want to keep it, but I'm afraid to change mods that I've already released. And my wife is not, she doesn't really have enough of an opinion about which one she prefers. But either way, let me show you something that you can't unsee once you've seen it. Sigmar is reversed on that cheek. They just took this skin and just, yeah, reversed it. I was hoping that they'd fix that in Warhammer 3, but they didn't. Anyway, but whatever. So I'm actually going to do both and just have them both on hand. So first of all, we can see which part is his head, like his face part right here. So I'm going to break it up and delete it. Now, he has really distinctive eye color and eyes. And it may be a small detail, but it might be worth keeping them. Sounds, weird and like a serial killer move, but we're going to keep it for the time being. These two eyes are the first two, so I'm going to just select the rest of it and I'm going to recombine them, but I'm going to leave the eyes separate. That's great. Okay, so now what we're going to do is actually we're going to change his hands as well, because while it's probably not a big deal, I'm going to add Rapance's hands as well, just to make them more feminine looking. So now here's something weird. It's Respance in as the model. The model is described as Respance, but even though she is Rapance, they spelled it wrong. All right, so let's drag the body in, and we're gonna right click, make editable. Now I'm going to hide everything else for the time being. Oops. Hide these other parts and just focus on her. So she has her hands here, and they are a little more feminine, obviously, than his. So that's why I'm doing this. Okay. Delete this. It's only parts of her necklace. And we're going to split her up. Okay. So we're just going through and deleting everything that isn't, oops, her hands. Well, how about this? Let's just hide that. Ah, that's too bad. So instead, so if you notice, like if I look here, this is her hand and I hide it, but it's also her forearm. That's okay. I'll at least deal with that. So let me just hide this so I can then delete the rest. Okay, so now we have these parts that are her hand. So what we can do is, I'm going to pull up Karl Franz's body again, just to make sure. Yeah, his cuffs here are going to hide a fair amount of her hand. So what we want to do is we're going to click on this and hit F2, and I'm just going to delete. Now, if I want to add additional parts to it, I hold down Shift. Okay. If I want to take off parts, I hold down Control. So if I want to remove those, for example, so I'm going to get rid of any kind of hangover that I don't need to remove, namely her cup. Oh. And if you accidentally deselect, just Control Z. right. So I don't really have to be super careful with this, I don't think. But the big thing is, notice that it pulls the things across from it, so it actually goes right through. But anyway, I think this is probably fine, so I'm just gonna hit delete and see. Um, and then, maybe add a bit more, like get rid of this. Okay, so I don't have to do a perfect job on it, though I should probably delete all of this red as well. So just to be a completionist, I'm gonna do that. Just make sure that you're like kind of moving it around a bit and seeing what you have. Sometimes you can just select areas. Sometimes you might just have to click and delete individual faces. It doesn't matter. Um, and it's just a matter of how much work you want to put into making sure that nothing might like clip through and look weird. So I obviously don't want anything weird showing through. Okay, so now this is just hand. Okay, now if we do that, we need to go to Karl Franz and we need to split him up, but I'm pretty sure his hand is actually separate, so that actually works out for us. I'm going to select his other hand, delete it, so he has no hand, recombine everything. Okay, now we have her hand. And again, it's like a small detail, but it's just nice to make sure that any skin showing through is going to be, you know, um, feminine or whatever. Okay, so it's just one of those things that I like to do when I'm working on mods is do what I can to sell the illusion that I'm going for. So the illusion here is that, it's a woman. So I want a woman um, hand and skin showing through rather than a man's hand. Actually, it looks like I probably took a little too much off. It really matters, but again, I'm just want to be very careful. All right. Let's see, Karl Franz. Oh, he's down here. So I'm just being careful that like any parts that I remove here, notice I deleted too much here. Okay. I just want to make sure that I'm not deleting too much. Sometimes you'll get these parts like this. It's just like, why can't I select it? And you just have to select it at the top or the bottom. All right. Delete, delete. I don't have to be too careful past, like, as long as it's not past this point here, I'm okay. Because again, he has those sleeves, so I just have to make sure that when I'm selecting these things, that I, don't delete too much skin. That's all that really matters, is I'm not taking off too much skin. At the end of the day, even if I took off just a bit too much, it probably wouldn't matter because nobody'd really notice. But I'd notice, and that's what matters to me. So, you just have to be as anal as you want to be because most people don't notice those things. And the reality is the game is full of like clipping issues and stuff anyway. So, having a bit of clipping in your mod isn't going to make it add necessarily, and it's not going to make it stand out separate from the rest of the game. So that's just something to keep in mind. And sometimes I have to tell myself that, like, okay, I did the best I can for clipping, and that's all I could do. So you've watched me delete a whole bunch of triangles for hands that probably you couldn't tell the difference in game from, the rest of it. But the important thing to me is that I have now done that just fine. So I'm going to recombine the hands and we're back here. with almost no change, visible change, right? But if you notice, our hands are a little more slender. Now we're going to bring in her head. So as I mentioned, originally, I basically did this, right? So I just pulled her head into the game. Now there's a few problems with it. One, I don't know how I feel about her neck showing. I mean, the reality is Karl Franz's neck, he has a bit of shoulders, but it still kind of just ends here somewhere. And it might not be noticeable in most situations, but it might be good also to kind of hide it, hide that connection point. And so I do that occasionally for mods, but now we have this. Okay, so pretty much, I mean, I could be done here with my model if I want it to. But like I said, I feel like I think the helmet is important. So this helmet being here, I think is an important aspect of Karl Franz. And since I'm remaking it, I'm going to probably leave that in. So let's right click and make her head editable first. Now I'm going to hide the head. And if you notice, one of these is her hair, the other one's her face. So I'm going to delete the hair. Don't need it. All right, now she has a toilet bowl haircut, but that's all right. We're gonna hide it in the helmet. Okay, so if you notice, she still looks feminine. You can still tell clearly that she's a woman. She has a very feminine face. That's the benefit of her pants as a model, is that her face is quite feminine. So it can still sell a woman in a helmet. That's sometimes a problem in the real world, at least. If you were trying to sell it in, like, say, a movie, you'd have to just have a bare head. I mean, plus movies love to show a bare head anyway. They don't like helmets because they paid all that money for this actor. They're gonna get their money's worth, right? But I still I still do like that. So again, I'm hitting F2 and I'm just looking for the parts that are clipping, which are gonna be her ears, obviously. So if I hide his head, we can see which parts of her ears they are that are the issues. And if I really want, I could actually go through and kind of get more of her ears just to be safe. So I'm holding down Shift and I'm just going to go through and just get rid of as much ear as is practical. And I'm just making sure that I'm not catching parts that shouldn't be in there. Oops, Control Z. So like these parts here, if I grab parts that I don't mean to, Control and select, we'll get rid of them. I'm just being very careful not to catch areas behind it. So like when I'm getting rid of stuff, I'm making sure it's at an angle from the rest of the selected ear so that I'm not accidentally deselecting that. All right. And I'm going to deselect this part. Okay, so that seems good. Delete it. She doesn't have ears or hair anymore, but that's okay. She is there. Now, because she is an HU1, I don't have to, as a skeleton, I don't have to change her animation or anything. So we are good to go. Now, here's another thing to note is even in the animations of the vanilla, like sometimes body parts do weird stuff and you need to be more open. So like if you notice this animation always squeezes this right arm here. So like I was saying, the vanilla game has its oddities that people don't really notice anyway. I mean, shoot, Sigvald is backwards here. The animation squeezes that forearm. So you just have to be aware of that when you're doing your models and just try not to make it too obvious. So as long as it's not obvious from like, here, it's not a big deal, right? Anyway, so that's just something to keep in mind. And I paint miniatures, and that's something I also have to keep in mind when I'm painting, right? Is that like the viewing distance isn't right up to your eyeball. All right, so I'm pretty much done. But the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna hide this like connection point. And what I often do for that one is gonna be like the blazing nights. I feel like that is or the Reichsguard, they're black. They have like a black armor. If I do this Blazing Sun here, has gold, and it might blend in a little bit better. I also really like this, like, whatever this part of the helmet is called, this thingy. Really like that. I'm probably going to make use of it in a future model. Yeah, I'm trying to remember the name. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We're going to delete the part that we're not using, and I'm going to split it up. Okay. This part right here. What is that called? I'm sure somebody will let me know. Okay. So now if you notice, that kind of hides that connection a little bit better so that a casual observer might not notice anything. And realistically speaking, a casual observer probably wouldn't notice anything, but it's just something to be aware of. The other thing though is if I do that, it introduces some potential for clipping that I need to deal with. And so basically all I'm gonna do is go through and delete parts that I don't need. So it's like, okay, namely this back here, this back is where it's gonna clip. And so if I just focus on it and delete parts of it, and because I'm anal about these things, I do like to make sure it is um, like the same parts are being deleted. Now these parts right here were just the underlying parts. You have like two sides of the model. You have the upper side and the bottom side. Okay, so now we have that, and she's not clipping, her armor isn't clipping through there, but it is going to clip through here. So I can just go through and individually click them if I want. So again, this is just somewhere a way to like hide connections is to add other body parts. Now I might do like a chainmail one as well if I want, like, because you know a chain coif would probably make more sense. So I might go through and do that. But that's just something that I keep in mind that like if I see in game that her neck is showing, I'll do something like this. I'm going to delete it for the time being though, but just to give you an example of sometimes the connections aren't great and you just have to hide them. All right, so we have her though. Now the other option that we have is like if I want to go with the original Karl Franz eyes, I can also do that, which sounds kind of weird, but you know, that's a part of his model. His eye color is kind of important. You might feel that that's necessary, but I don't know. I'm not so sure I need that. Let's see. Let me hide the Rapant's head and just bring out his eyes. So, like I said, I could move these around if I want. So let's see. Again, if you notice, first off, I want to pay attention to her eye location. Um, the top of her eyelid here is kind of covering a bit of her eye. So that's something to keep in mind. So I'm going to split her head and I'm going to hide eyes. Wow, that sounds like a serial killer statement. Okay, so we have these two Karl Franz eyes and we're going to move them around. So I have the move. Okay, notice it's a bit higher and very intense stare there. Okay, and they're a bit closer together. So we're just gonna adjust this just a bit. So whenever I'm doing like up down, I'm selecting them both. But when I am doing left right, obviously I have to select just one at a time. So, oops. Okay, that's centralized decent enough. I need to pull it back just a bit, or maybe move it just a bit forward. So here, if you notice, that now has her eyes matching his eye color, which again, you might think that's kind of pointless, but I don't know. I think it's pretty important. The only thing I'm seeing here on this eye is that it's kind of clipping weird. So maybe I moved it over too much. So maybe I need to move it back. All right. Okay, so again, this is my option here, is I can go with these eyes instead. All right, so I'm going to remove her blue eyes and leave in his, like, I don't even know what color that would be for eyes. Almost like a yellow, but it's like, I guess you'd call that hazel or something, right? Anyway, don't know, whatever. I have blue eyes, so that's the only color I need to know, right? Okay, so here we have her. And like I said, she's already HU1, so we're good to go on her animation. Don't need to mess with anything. Just got to make sure that nothing's clipping. Like I said, in-game, if I feel her neck is showing too much, then I will get a coif or something from another model and put it in, potentially, but we're good here. So now that we're there, I'm going to go to the editable model, change the level of detail distance to a scale of 10 by a scale of 10, because I like to do that with my legendary lord, since the scale here is like, they just have them so close in Warhammer 3. I'm going to auto generate, refresh, make sure that this looks good. Yes, it does. And I'm going to file and save that. Ignore this sometimes unless you have a bunch of models. Oh, I should note that I didn't recombine that, so that's probably part of it. So I might as well recombine that. Okay, now I'm going to regenerate the LODs just in case. I'm going to save this, save. It's now saved in my reskins, right click, save, and we are good on this. The other thing I would do is in my mod itself is I'm going to also use the tool to generate a WS model in my mod itself, because I don't like to generate it in my, my pack here, because then it will fill it up with like textures and stuff that I really don't want in this. I have this exclusively for rigid models. But the reason why we generate a WS model is only because that's the only way that we can get the blood splatter from Blood for the Blood God to work on the model. If you use a rigid model to define your character, it will not show that. So it doesn't show blood. So if you don't care about that, rigid models are fine. And to be honest, I don't care about it, but people that use my mod do. So I've started making it as a WS model for them because I don't use that mod. Anyway, hopefully that helps. Thanks for watching.